So welcome to New York Bubblies for New Year's Eve, presented by the New York Wine and Grape Foundation. I'm Wanda Mann, and I'll be your moderator for this conversation, this wonderful hour of wine. Some of you are probably wondering, who is Wanda Mann? That is a very fair question. Well, I'm a native New Yorker born in Manhattan. I'm a certified specialist of wine with the Society of Wine Educators, contributing editor at the Somm Journal. I also contribute to Tasting Panel, and I also run the wine lifestyle website, Wine with Wanda. So all in all, I've been writing about wine for over a decade. If you want to learn more, you can find me on Instagram at Wine Dine Wanda. So I am a true lover of sparkling wine. So I was so delighted when I was asked to moderate this panel. I don't wait for a special occasion. I pop a bottle of bubbly at least twice a week. I really do love sparkling wine from all over the world. But let's face it, we can't deny that the holidays and sparkling wine are a match made in heaven, and especially New Year's Eve. So tonight I'm here with 5 fantastic producers and their sensational sparkling wines. You'll see why sparkling wines from the Empire State are perfect for all of your holiday celebrations, and especially for toasting a new year. I think we're all ready to say farewell to 2020. I think I could get 100% agreement on that. But why not give it an elegant send-off with a little New York attitude? Now, sparkling wine production is not a fad in New York State. Its history spans almost a century. After Prohibition, Charles Fournier, originally of Veuve Clicquot Ponsardin, became the winemaker and production manager of Urbana Wine Company in the Finger Lakes. So tonight you're going to see that New York State's wine producers, when it comes to sparkling wine, they embrace tradition and also innovation. So now you see all these other lovely sparkling faces on the screen. I'm going to start introducing them. So from Lakewood Vineyards, we have Ben Stamp winemaker that's located in the Finger Lakes. So Ben's going to wave hello.
Everyone, thank you, Wanda.
Thank you. So Lakewood, just to give you a little background, is family-owned and operated farm winery, established in 1988, and they have some old vines dating back to 1952. Very impressive. Next up, also from the Finger Lakes, we have Sue Passmore, winemaker for Buttonwood Grove Winery. Hi, Sue.
Good evening, everyone.
Thanks for being here. Now, Buttonwood was awarded the Governor's Cup in 2017. Their 2016 Riesling was recognized as the best wine in New York State. So tonight we're going to have your sparkling Riesling. Something tells me that's going to be pretty special as well. Next up from Long Island, we have Christopher Tracy, Strong Island, that's right, festive with the tree. He is the partner and winemaker for Channing Daughters. Hi, Christopher.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming.
So Channing Daughters planted their first vineyards in 1982, and they say the Atlantic breezes cool their vineyards and create a climate that's hospitable to a wide array of fascinating grape varieties. And the one we're going to taste later is pretty surprising, I think. So I'm really excited about that. Next up, we have Fred Merworth from Hermann J. Wiemer Vineyard. Hi, Fred.
Hi, Wanda. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
So also in the Finger Lakes is represented tonight. So you're located on the eastern slopes of Seneca Lake. Standing Stone embraces the pioneering spirit of Charles Fournier. So remember that name, the gentleman from Veuve Clicquot. So there's a connection there with Standing Stone. And your Chardonnay and Riesling were planted in the 1970s by Charles and Guy Duveau. So that's going to be very exciting to taste. And last, but certainly not least, Phil Aris from Damiani Wine Cellars. Hi, Phil.
Hi, how's it going?
Thanks for being here. So you first planted vines in 1997, and they proudly embrace an old world style of winemaking. And I'm very excited. So that's the one we're going to end with. So thank you all out there for watching. Thank you for celebrating with us. If you have any questions, leave them in the chat area. We'll try to get to them as we go along. We want this to be as interactive as possible. So we're going to go ahead and jump in with the first wine, which is this wonderful bubbly Candeo from Lakewood Vineyards. That's Ben Stamp's wine. This is the 2019 vintage, and it retails for about $13. So Ben, I have to say, Cayuga White, not a very familiar grape to many of us. So tell us about Cayuga White.
Oh, I love Cayuga White, Wanda. Cayuga White was actually pretty much the original Cornell University hybrid variety. It was hybridized by a group of grape researchers up in Cornell, actually all the way back in 1945. Now, people have been hybridizing grape varieties since the late 1700s, really, and long before that, if you don't count interspecific hybrids of the native European and Native American varieties. But there's been more modern efforts towards grapevine breeding, headed up here on the East Coast by Cornell University. They have a repository of grapevines at their campus up in Geneva, New York, just at the north end of Seneca Lake, where they have many thousands of grapevines that they've collected from fields and forests all over the world, and they grow them there as a genetic repository for their grapevine breeding program, where they attempt to find and create new varieties that have interesting characteristics. And Cayuga White was really their first big success story. It's grown all over the Finger Lakes and all over the Northeast. And it has been since the early 60s. So we've been growing it here at Lakewood Farms for a long time. My great-grandfather planted some of it here. He was the one who originally purchased this property here on the west side of Seneca Lake in 1951 and planted the first grapes in 1952. So my family's been growing grapes here for quite a while. But for many years, we just grew those grapes and sold them to other local producers, some larger local producers that were pretty well established at the time. And it wasn't until 1988 that we did our first vintage of Lakewood Vineyards wine and opened our tasting room to the public in 1989. So we've been around a little over 30 years. And this Bubbly Candeo, which I'm going to crack open now, and I encourage you guys to as well, definitely represents one of our innovations here at Lakewood Vineyards. You know, we do a lot of things really traditionally, but we're always curious about what else we can do with some of the varieties and some of the technology that we have out there these days. And Candeo represents a bit of a combination of our innovative look at winemaking and just many years of tweaking this recipe and getting this wine exactly where we want it. We first actually started making this wine in 2008. That was our first vintage. We had an idea after a pretty inspiring trip to Italy, where we discovered many a Prosecco that we were astounded by the quality and the affordability of that wine. And we thought, man, you know, I think there's a way that we can do a wine that is affordable and as refreshing and exciting as a nice Prosecco out of the grapes that we grow in the Finger Lakes. And Cayuga White being a nice, fruit-forward, clean, decent acidity white grape that we harvest a little bit on the earlier side, really hit all the numbers for us. And so we really built this wine around Cayuga White. And I think it was a good decision because it's super crisp and clean with a lot of really nice, almost Riesling-like character, a little bit of a Granny Smith apple character as well. But the effervescence doesn't bring out any bitterness at all. It's just really clean, fun, and easy to drink. And it's one of those sparkling wines that you don't really need an occasion to open. And that's kind of what we're going for here. So I'm curious to hear what you think about it.
And festive. I know you all have it in your glasses as well. So what do you think? Thumbs up from Christopher. And you know, the name Candeo, you want to give us a little background on that for those who might be wondering?
Yeah, Candeo is from the Latin root to sparkle. And so this is actually, you know, this wine does not undergo a secondary fermentation. We wanted to keep it light and fun and approachable. It is a carbonated wine. So we finished this wine and stop the fermentation at just the right point of balance so that we can have that nice crisp finish. These grapes are picked really early in the morning, usually a little bit earlier than we would normally pick Cayuga for some of our other whites. And we bring them in and press them cold. And when I say press them, I guess I mean we put them in the press and pretty much just let whatever juice comes out naturally. That's what makes this wine. So this is 100% free run Cayuga. And that keeps that nice, clean, crisp acidity, that nice, clean finish on the palate where you don't have any phenolic bitterness, and just makes the wine imminently drinkable. It's definitely the most popular wine among our staff. Maybe that's on account of my mother and my wife, who both get along very well over a bottle of this. And it's the first wine to come out during the holidays when the family all gets together. So hopefully we can do that again someday. But
that could be part of your campaign, bringing, mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law together over Sunday.
Yeah.
There we go. I don't want to be responsible for when it doesn't work.
I think this is a great wine to serve at the beginning if you're entertaining people, because it's low in alcohol as well. It's fruity, it's refreshing. It's kind of stress-free, but it's a lot of fun. I mean, the fruit is there, but it's off dry, has great texture, it's full in the mouth. Really, really delicious.
Thank you. Yeah, we wanted a wine that just needed no occasion, because this is the 21st century here. We shouldn't have to wait for a big special occasion. As fun as it is to drink sparkling wine on New Year's Eve and on someone's birthday and large anniversaries, we think that we all deserve to have it maybe a little bit more often than that. So this wine is for the Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday nights when you just need a sparkling wine.
I can drink to that. And the price point is right, everybody, right? So $13. And I love it. It's a native New Yorker, just like many of us. So this really, really exciting. So thank you. Anything else you want to add, Ben, that we might not have covered?
You know what? I'm happy to answer any questions anybody else has about this wine. So feel free to fire them off to me.
Someone is asking if this bubbly is available in a can.
Ooh, very good question. The fun thing about having this wine as a carbonated wine is that we can do it in multiple formats. We actually do this in not only our 750 milliliter bottle, but we do it in a 187, which is your airline size bottle as well. And we've also, the last 2 years, we've been doing this in 250 milliliter cans, which we actually have to sell. We actually have to sell in 4-packs due to TTB regulations, but they're a lot of fun. They're good on the go. You can, we have a lot of people that they'll take them when they're going camping. They'll take them out on a boat, or if they're around the pool in the summertime, they think glass might not be the safest option. So we've been experimenting with some other packaging options for this, and we've had some success with that. But we're, much like when we first started making this wine, we kind of dip our toe in cautiously, try to learn everything we can about it and really immerse ourselves in that, because there's a lot of technical stuff that goes along with it. But this is a fun one and makes a nice stocking stuffer, as you can see, compared to the full-size bottle here. This is perfect for this is basically just add orange juice. You got yourself a mimosa for Christmas morning.
Perfect. Yeah, it's really, really fun. Well, thank you, Ben, and everyone be on the lookout for the Candeo 2019. So next up, I believe we have the sparkling Riesling from Buttonwood Grove. Sue.
Hi, all. Yes, let's open this bottle and have a little taste of our sparkling Riesling. This is a new one for us. Last year, Ben did a Tuesday sparkling wine for us that was actually a blend. So this year's 2019 Riesling is a new bubbly for us that he helped to force carbonate it for us. We tend to be focusing more and more specifically into our Rieslings here at Buttonwood and our Cab Francs, and trying to expand those whole series of wines in a number of different styles and ways for people. And so this is what we were looking to try and do. We actually had a lot of extra Riesling last year that we were able to get our hands onto. So we were quite excited about all of that, and allowed us to dip our toe into this Riesling bubbly. So a little on the sweet side, but the carbonation helps to balance that all off. We're quite excited about this new product for us. Again, just like Ben was saying, this is important for those folks who want something that sparkles, but they don't want a traditional wine. And so this helps get those folks in the door. It's a nice price point for them. And I'm a firm believer in sparkling wine. My husband and I have sparkling wine every Friday night. It has been a tradition in our household for a long, long time. And so we're hoping that other folks will begin to enjoy sparklings also.
So I'm curious, when you're making a sparkling Riesling, are you looking for different qualities in those Riesling grapes than you would for your still Riesling?
So yes and no. So with our first year into this, we were actually looking for a consumer-friendly Riesling. We also developed a couple of those last year and just expanded on it with the sparkling. We had a little extra, and so therefore we could delve into this. And so we wanted a consumer-friendly wine, and that was where we were going to start with this whole game. We have some other sparkling wines that have been made traditionally that are in the bottle, but we haven't quite dared to open them up and put the dressage in and complete them. So you know, stepping stones for us as a new player in the sparkling world.
You know, and it's true, Riesling is really, you know, the wine probably where Finger Lakes has the most name recognition. You know, it's very closely identified with the region. And as I said, you won best, you know, wine in New York State for the 2016 Riesling. I know one of the things that sometimes confuses consumers about Riesling is not knowing how sweet it's going to be. Is it going to be off dry? Is it going to be very sweet? So do you always with this wine, do you stick with kind of this off dry style to keep it consistent?
Right. A bit on the off dry. It makes it a little friendlier also than to put it into the wholesale end of the world for restaurants, for bars to use to pour also. So yes, we're looking for that off dry kind of perfect, easy to drink without having a lot of food necessarily on the table. Mm-hmm. So that's where we're hoping to go with this.
And the other thing that you and Ben would have in common would be your choice of carbonation. And I would just look, and Ben, you can jump in here as well. But, you know, I think sometimes there's a misconception that if it's not traditional method, that somehow it's not as valid. But just like with Prosecco, some grapes do respond better, or you get a different style of wine is just as valid with the forced carbonation or Chaumont method. So both of you, I would love to hear you talk about why you chose that method, and also screw cap. Someone left a question about why screw cap for the wine.
Oh, great questions. I'll jump in real quick, Sue, and then you can take it home here. You know, we do a traditional method sparkling wine here as well at Lakewood, which is 100% bottle fermented. And, you know, we alternate between Chardonnay and Pinot Noir on different years when we do that. This is something entirely different. Something about the carbonation process preserves so much of that fresh citrus fruit flavor and kind of an excitement to the wine that you know doesn't have the layered complexity maybe that a bottle fermented wine has. And this is this is a little bit of a different animal, but we were going and we've seen a lot of consumers really pushing for something that's kind of really fresh and exciting, something that lights their mouth up a little bit and retains all those fresh flavors of, you know, like a young Riesling or a young Cayuga. And we find that the carbonation allows those flavors to really be put at the forefront. And we don't have all the toasty, yeasty flavors that usually come along with the more traditional method. So yeah, I mean, we do both here, and they both have a place in our lineup and definitely a place on our tables. So it's fun to work with both of them. But it's definitely a style that we find is just really, really approachable and drinkable.
Sue?
I think for a lot of people, this style of carbonation also is more approachable. Some people have a real aversion to a champagne. They think the bubbles are too much for them. And so these lightly carbonated styles are very approachable for a lot of our folks who want, I hate to say this, but more of the characteristics of soda in some ways than you would get from a traditional form of a sparkling wine. And so that also comes into play. And for us, we had some other products prior to this that had that light carbonation that we can no longer carry in the tasting room. They're not available to us. And this helps to replace those products by having this style of carbonation available to people. And it's very approachable as far as monetary. You know, it's that nice price point.
And screw caps. Someone
yes.
asked, screw caps.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about that cork flying off, you know, although to be honest with you, that is one of my most favorite sounds in the whole wide world is that pop from that cork. Even if you're not supposed to do it that way. A lot of people don't like to see that cork flying around in the air.
Yeah, the trade-off is you can screw that cap back on and put this back in the fridge, and those bubbles will stay intact in there until you pour some more, right. Which is a huge advantage. We know our tasting room staff certainly like that, so they don't have to deal with the crazy wing stopper and the gadgets that try to contain the bubbles. So yeah, it's an interesting solution. It's definitely an innovation in wine packaging because pressure rated screw caps are a newer innovation in the world of wine packaging. So we've been doing that since 2014. We changed over to screw caps on that product, and it's really about convenience, and we want this wine to have no pretenses, just being about relaxing and trying to enjoy it with as little pomp and circumstance as possible.
Perfect. So Sue, one last question for you. Someone's asking, what is the residual sugar on the sparkling Riesling?
It's about 2.5.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you both so much. So we're going to move on to, I call this wine kind of a wine geek dream. So we have Tracy up from Channing Daughters with their 2018 Tocai Friulano Pét-Nat. So with this wine, you're getting a grape that some people go, huh, what's that? And also a method that's old to become new again. So Christopher, why Tocai Friulano?
Hey, Wanda, thanks for having me. And thanks to the New York Wine and Grape Foundation as well. Awesome that they're doing this stuff. Why Tocai? Because we love Tocai. Tocai is a awesome white grape variety that originates in Northeast Italy. We have been drinking these wines for years and love them. And to take that back to where Ben started with some of the Cornell stuff, my partner Larry Perrine was instrumental in starting one of the research vineyards for Cornell down here in the 80s, which then Alice Wise went on to run and still runs and has done incredible work there. And her work with the Vine Balance workbook that she created with Libby moved exactly into the sustainable Long Island Certified Sustainable Wine Growing Program, which is a whole nother topic of conversation. But at that vineyard, we've been growing all sorts of varieties for all sorts of different reasons for the trade and the public as those services at Cornell go to see how they would fare in our particular region. And Tocai was one of those varieties. And so we knew it would work from the experiments and plantings that Larry and Alice had done theirs over the years. And so in 1999, we planted Tocai at Channing Daughters and started to make it, I think the first vintage was 2002. And we generally make it as a still wine. We've got our growing partner, Steve Mudd, to plant it on the North Fork in a vineyard with us at the Mudd West Vineyard in 2005. So for a while, sometimes we make a two, a Sylvanas vineyard and a Mud West vineyard, two different sites and expressions, a South Fork and a North Fork wine. Sometimes we blend them together. And then when we started making Pét-Nats, we started making it in a sparkling version as well. So
yeah, I love, Tocai, Friulano. I've been to Italy, and they really do make, if not the best white wines in Italy, certainly top tier wines. I have to say, this grape is just, it's so expressive.
well, even more so as a sparkling version. I mean, that's one of the great things about sparkling wines. I mean, it's not a super aromatic variety, but it does have great aromas, more in the Sauvignon Blanc, and kind of, but not quite as aggressive. So you get this kind of fresh citrusy and sometimes almond, and it can vary from green almonds all the way to Marcona, depending on the vintage and all sorts of other things. But great citrus fruit, great minerality, great saltiness in our region that seems to run through a lot of the wines. And yeah, it just goes with so many different foods. And then hence, when you put that in a sparkling version, it just helps lift those aromas, and, and you get even more of a aromatic burst of just deliciousness.
Well, we have a mix of trade and consumers watching. So for those who may not know what Pét-Nat means, Pétillant Natural, I would love for you to briefly explain the process and why you thought that was a great match for this.
Well, we wanted to make sparkling wines at Channing Daughters, and we don't have the resort. Well, Method Champenoise traditional method sparkling wines, as the next couple of guys will talk about, is a whole nother ball of wax, and is takes so much experience and expertise and time and money and space, and we just didn't have those things at the moment, and we really wanted sparkling wines. And Allison, our general manager, and my wife also really wanted sparkling wines, and I really wanted sparkling wines. And Pét-Nats are something we can do, I think, that is suitable for our region, is something ancient, but something new again. We were appreciating them as they were seeing a resurgence. They're not easy to do by any stretch of the imagination, because it's a sort of a triangulation of a whole bunch of unpredictable factors that change like everything with winemaking from vintage to vintage. But we figured it was our best shot at making something delicious and expressive of our place and the variety and our culture and what we want to do in expressing Channing Daughters and the South Fork and the east end of Long Island and a particular grape variety. And so Pét-Nats are, well, we start with a wild fermentation. We take the grapes, we hand harvest them, we whole cluster press them. So we put them in the press on their clusters, press them gently, settle the juice overnight. And then for the Pét-Nats, we'll go in through the top of the tank and just take the portion out that's the cleanest juice, the clearest juice, especially because I do want some consistency within the Pét-Nats and the style of Pét-Nat. And there's a lot of questions or controversies about what exactly may or may not be Pét-Nat. I mean, do they have to be wild yeast or do they not? Can they be filtered or can they not? And whatever, we can, those, I'm not arguing, me really interested. I'll tell you what I do, and hopefully the wine's delicious and expressive. So we take that, we press it, we settle the juice, we take it off, we put it in a stainless steel tank, wild ferment. So it's a wild fermentation that starts, and then we start monitoring it so it can get to the sugar level that we want it to be to create the appropriate amount of pressure, residual sugar, alcohol. At that point, we have to act fast to get it in the bottle so it can finish fermenting in the bottle, as opposed to a traditional method when we would make a still wine like those guys did with the carbonation and then carbonated it. We would make a still wine, maybe blend it, maybe not, then put it back into bottles with liqueur de tirage, which is a mixture of yeast and sugar, to create another fermentation, a secondary fermentation in the bottle, after which you riddle, get the yeast to the bottom, disgorge, a whole set of processes. So with this, we can have that wild fermentation. So I can create consistency in the wines and have all the Pét-Nats taste the same and open the same, instead of having, 300,000 different fermentations. Is right at that point, we'll filter them very lightly through very coarse filtration. So like what's called an EnduraPad, it's a 10 micron filter through a plate and frame filtration. So all it really does is takes out a lot of solids and leaves still all those yeast cells and bacteria in there, but takes out the bulk of the solids. So there's not 2 or 3 fingers of solids in the bottle, because I'm not going to disgorge, because if I was going to take the time to riddle and disgorge, I want to make a method champenoise, because Jesus, I've already spent the time and the money to do that. So I'm not doing that. So we do that filtration, boom, we bottle it within an hour or by the next morning. The wine is consistent, it's clear, and it's like, you're like, oh my God, is this thing ever gonna ferment again? And then within a week or two or a month, it starts to ferment again. It poops out a little bit of sediment, tartrate crystals, yeast sediment and solids, hopefully not that much, but can vary, but hopefully we've controlled that a little bit, and we've gotten better and better at that so we can control the fizziness as well. And there you have it, method ancestral or Pét-Nat. The most controversial part in our process of that would probably be the filtration part. There might be a whole bunch of people who'd be like, what, yeah, but I mean, whatever, it's delicious and it's expressive, and you know.
Well, the product is
and
great.
It's the truth.
Well, I'm so glad you explained that, because I do think people have this idea of kind of winemaking run amok, that you just let it do its thing and what you get is what you get. But you really talked about the controls you have along the way and filtration.
Oh yeah, and controlling it to get it, because we don't have the exactitude that you have within traditional method, knowing exactly how much liquor de tirage we're putting in there. And I don't have the equipment at the winery I don't have, like a gas spectrometer to measure the exact, residual sugar, glucose, and I just don't have that. Nancy Ireland does, at Red Tail Ridge. She could do that. Fred probably might even have some of that stuff. I don't know, maybe not. But I, I don't have, so I have to send it out to a lab. That's going to take a couple of days. So I'm using old school methods of evaluating how much sugar there is, hydrometers, my palate, trying to triangulate where exactly it is to try and nail a sugar range where it's going to be ultimately delicious and safe and not blow up and, all those other things too.
Absolutely. I'm curious, has anyone else experimented with the Pét-Nat or have any thoughts on Pét-Nat?
Oh, in this group? Oh,
the fellow winemakers want to jump in?
Oh yeah, Pét-Nat is a lot of fun. Yeah, we're playing with Pét-Nats. The nice thing about Pét-Nats, besides all of that, is the turnaround time. So our Riesling Pét-Nat for this year is already in the bottle and in the tasting room from 2020.
Really?
Yeah, that's one of the great things. I mean, you can have the wine literally in the bottle a week, 2 weeks after fermentation. I mean, we've done it as quickly as 8 or 9 days. I mean, usually it's about 2 or 3 weeks, but depending on how warm it is, I mean, all our ferments are outside in in bins or tanks or barrels, and so if it's a warm vintage, those things can roar quickly through. I mean, we've had Pét-Nats, and that taking the pressure off of tank space during harvest and having wines already in the bottle from the vintage is like, it's a complete nightmare when it's happening, and then it's like this gift afterwards.
Well, so much fun. I mean, it's easy, but it's good. It's a good wine.
I hope they're delicious. And this goes with so many things, and start the evening with some, a charcuterie platter, some light goat or sheep's milk cheeses, and you could have it with, everything. I mean, anything. A roast chicken, fried chicken with this would be awesome.
Absolutely.
We're going to have some mushroom lasagna in a little while. I think that sounds good with it.
Long Island so far, darn it. Well, thank you.
Thanks for having us, Wanda.
So now we're moving a bit into more traditional, but still very creative and innovative. So Fred, you're next from Hermann J. Wiemer Vineyard. And we have your Standing Stone Blanc de Blanc 2017, about $32 retail. So Fred, I'm just so excited. So now we're getting in closer to that champagne style. You had that connection to Charles Fournier. What makes this is the single vineyard wine, clearly inspired by champagne. So I want to know what makes this Chardonnay, your terroir, respond so well to Chardonnay and makes it suitable for a Blanc de Blanc.
Great. Well, thank you, Wanda. And great to be on this panel with everybody. We've been working with Chardonnay for sparkling for since the early 80s. Hermann was doing some early sparklings with Riesling and Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And I've done Blanc de Blancs from 2 previous sites. And this is our 3rd Blanc de Blanc. And it's really kind of a intriguing exploration for us to figure out where we should be making Blanc de Blancs in the Finger Lakes. I think as a producer, we've moved south on the lake from a northern vineyard that we have to one of our oldest vineyard sites here at Hermann Wiemer. And we do a Blanc de Blanc from that site, HJW. We took over Standing Stone in 2017, and part of the reason that the vineyard was so interesting was it was planted by Guy Devaux and Charles Fournier. It was planted for sparkling production in the early 70s. Ironically, the fruit was never used for sparkling because Guy Devaux and Charles Fournier ended up moving to California before any of the fruit came into production. So it's always been still wine Chardonnay. And so when we took over in 2017, we said, this was planted with the plant material, with the idea in mind from a site selection standpoint that this should be sparkling. I tasted Standing Stone still wine Chardonnays many times, and I thought, this might be a very different presentation of a Finger Lakes Blanc de Blanc than what Hermann Wiemer as a vineyard has been focused on. The Hermann Wiemer, our Old Vines Chardonnay Blanc de Blanc, is quite round and rich. We tended to do quite a bit of lees aging, anywhere from 40 to 60 months of lees aging in a very traditional manner. And tasting this fruit very young, tasting the still wines, I thought, man, this might be actually a style that we could release fairly young, under 36 months, and really capture a Blanc de Blanc styling. I don't know if anybody knows the champagne producer Pierre Giminet. They're doing very early Blanc de Blancs, very early release, but they're also doing vintage champagnes and late releases. It's a really one of my favorite producers, and we've pushed that limit, not pushed the limit, but we've pushed for aged Blanc de Blancs. This for me was an opportunity to do something, an early release, and kind of show off the site. What's really, I think, for me special about the site is it's a flintiness. It's a minerality that I don't necessarily always taste on the west side of Seneca Lake. I get that in the glass now. This was just disgorged 2 weeks ago. We worked through the first disgorging very quickly, and after harvest got this riddled and in the market. But this is about 30 months on the lees, no dosage, so 0 dosage on it. The base wine is all natural, like all of our wines, all natural from fermentation. And then this was bottled in summer of 2018. So yeah, it's continuing our kind of exploration of traditional methods and where we should be growing them.
It's wonderful. Someone is asking the clones of the Chardonnay, Fred.
Yeah, being on the nursery side also, I'm very curious about the clones on this as well. I don't, in the log books of when it was planted, it's clone 96. But when it was planted in 1974, it was before 96 was actually, clone 96 out of Dijon was actually a thing. So it could just be a Massal selection. It could be, I have some work to do on that. I'm not convinced that it's clone 96.
Not convinced. I love it.
Yeah.
So is this a wine that you crafted with aging in mind? Is this a champagne that you want to maybe revisit in 5 years, 10 years?
That's a great question. Yes and no. We just released a 2009 with 10 years of lees aging a Hermann Wiemer Blanc de Blanc. This wine is slightly out of that box. It's really, I want to see it as a young, vibrant, with very little autolysis and the bready kind of characters. I kind of like it as it is. It's fresh and vibrant. Having pushed cuvées to 36 months, 60 months, 120 months, I know where this wine, I have a good sense of where this wine might go. I really like it in this state, fresh and vibrant. So we're thinking Standing Stone Blanc de Blanc as this kind of 24 to 36 month on the lees, and then disgorge it fairly young, and versus the Wiemer wines that are over 36 months.
Great. You know, I always love, tasting traditional method wines from other regions, because I always like to remind people the method can be the same. It can be the same grape variety, but it's not meant to be an imitation. You're expressing your terroir in the Finger Lakes, that east side of Seneca Lake. So I just think it's so important to remind people, no, it's not champagne, and that's okay. It stands known as a traditional method wine and not meant to be an imitation.
That's, yeah, 100%. I mean, we're very proud to be in the Finger Lakes. We're doing this a similar method to get to a wine that's expressive in a way, but it should be reflective of our sites and our sense of place, not chasing something, I guess, is the best thing I can say about it. We're very proud to be in the Finger Lakes.
Yeah. Someone is asking, it's interesting. I can tell that all of you have some followers and people who know your wines, so they're asking questions very specific. Fred, would you ever consider making a sparkling Saperavi? Someone wants to know.
Oh, that is a fantastic question. We just bottled off of the 2019 vintage under Standing Stone. We bottled a sparkling Saperavi. I think, again, going to the spirit of this wine, I think we're actually going to disgorge it in March. So it will only have about 10 months of lees contact. The funny thing about Saperavi is, as in making traditional sparkling and doing a press fraction and keeping the free run juice and the lightly pressed juice separate, it's already red. Like, it's already almost completely red as free run. Phil can attest to this, working with Saperavi. It comes in as fruit, and anything that's dripping out is already red. So it is beyond rosé. It is. I would have to say it's a sparkling red wine.
Oh,
completely dry. It's very exciting. We're ready to release it.
Register that domain name now, Fred, beyondrose.com.
Beyond Rosé, I love it.
Before someone grabs it. Well, thank you so much. Loved it. So, Ben, also in that ooh la la traditional French style from Damiani. So we have your 2013 Brut. Here we go. Also traditional method. And this is kind of, that traditional blend that when we think of traditional method wine, we think some Chardonnay, we think some Pinot Noir, we think some Pinot Meunier. So tell us about what inspired you to make this wine, Ben? I mean, Phil, I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
You're both wearing flannel. It's throwing me off.
I know.
I'm honored.
We both have generic white guy syndrome. So we at Damiani, sparkling wine it's really the thing I'm most passionate about. Actually, for the most part, we're a dry red wine house. That's kind of, like 70% of our production is dry red. But whenever people ask me, what's your favorite wine? I can give them the 3-paragraph, really long-winded answer of, well, it depends on what I'm having, what am I pairing it with? What time of day is it? What time of year is it? Which way is the wind blowing? But my desert island wine is brut, sparkling champagne. Like if I am going to drink one wine for the rest of my life, it's going to be traditional method, aged for at least 5 years. We're definitely the oldest one in this lineup. And it's, you know, as you know, pretty much everyone here makes a traditional method as well. So everyone's dealt with all the labor and financial woes of trying to make traditional bubbly. And it's really hard to make it and price it at a cost-effective point, considering the number of times you have to lay hands on that bottle of wine. You know, it's some of the most expensive fruit to buy. It's some of the most expensive glass to buy. And then you have all this extra labor involved in lovingly bringing it to its endpoint. And just to add insult to injury, we want to let it sit for 6 years on the lees at least. So it's, I have a whole warehouse full of, 2,000 cases over 8 vintages that's just sitting there taking up space that it's always in my way. I always have to move it to get to what I need to get to. But we do it because we love the end result. I mean, all that autolysis, that we make 2 to 4 sparkling wines at Damiani every year because we're gluttons for punishment and it's what we all love to drink. So we have our everyday sparkler, like Ben, we have a Cayuga White based bubbly, which is probably our best seller, and then the brut is one of our slowest sellers we find actually, which is fine with us because that means I can drink half the vintage every year.
Think, Phil, you made this wine for yourself and said, okay, I guess I can sell a little bit of it.
Exactly. No, if we break even on this, we're good.
I do love the age on this. I mean, you get that nuttiness,
yep,
a little smokiness, really rich, but still the acidity. It's really,
yeah. The marzipan and toasty characteristics really come out. It's funny because I've been making wine. My first vintage was 2009, and this is our 2013. So this is only like my 4th or 5th swing at making bubbly. And I was looking at the notes and remembering, oh yeah, every year we inch it a little more towards Pinot Noir, a little more towards Pinot Noir. This is the first vintage we actually could include Pinot Meunier.
oh, it's the first time. Okay.
Yeah, and actually, Sue, it's from the Torah Run Vineyard. That's the first year we were able to get some Meunier, and that inspired us to plant our own Meunier, which we've now had in production for like 3 years. So
Nice.
yeah, the Meunier is. We always talk about the Meunier like it's the cream in your coffee. It just adds so much volume and body. Pinot Meunier on its own is almost too fruity and almost like too low acidity. So you need the Pinot Noir and the Chardonnay to bring that zip, which is really, if you're going for an age-worthy sparkling, I think that's pretty important to have a nice high acidity to keep it fresh in the bottle. Otherwise, you risk, you think you're doing a good thing by letting it age so long, and then it ends up being a little, it flattens out if that acidity falls away. So I go for just teeth-ripping acidity on my bubbly.
And if I read,
it's going to sit for a long time.
you dosaged with 2019 Pinot Noir.
Mm-hmm.
So
we put a tiny bit of dosage. I think this vintage was 3 grams, so 0.3%. Tiny little shot of dosage, but we always like to use fresh wine, the wine that we have in tank that's destined to be for the next bubbly. So we bring a little bit of that freshness back. We're talking microscopic amounts because it's 3 milliliters in a bottle, but but we do trials. We're pretty obsessive about. We'll beat our head against the wall and as an excuse to drink a lot of champagne in the lab, frankly, and we think we can tell the difference between a 3 milliliter dosage with Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. And that's really the fun part for me in making this wine is, you know, I've got Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and Pinot Meunier, and I vinify them all separately, and they each get their own treatments. And then at the end of it, you know, when the dust is settled from harvest and we're able to remember the day of the week, we take a long time and really work on our exact blend. And like I said, it's gone a little more Pinot Noir every year. So I think this is like 63% Pinot, but we also included 12% Pinot Meunier. So if you add the Pinots together, we're edging more and more towards a Blanc de Noir every year. We just did our blending 2 weeks ago for the 2020 vintage, and we're 95% Pinot and 5% Chardonnay.
Wow. Do you make a Blanc de Noir? Do you have that yet, or?
We do, yeah. Our first vintage of Blanc de Noir was 2011, and we made a whopping 50 cases of it. So that one went all to our wine club. Yeah, I think we made a Blanc de Noir in 2012 as well, and 2015. It's not something we do every year. We pull out Blanc de Noir when we feel like the vintage is really special. But other than that, when it comes to our sparkling program, the Brut is our flagship. Yeah. It can be 95% Pinot, but but that's I co-fermented the Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier this year because we had such a short crop given the hot, dry year we had.
Wonderful. Someone asked about the lease age, and I think it's 5.5 years if we didn't answer that, right, for the 2013, right? 5.5 years on the lease.
Yeah, bottled in, I always seem to bottle sparkling wine around St. Paddy's Day, not on purpose, but yeah, so 5.5, or we're going on 6 years at this point.
Okay.
We disgorge, 40 cases at a time, because I don't really like adding sulfites at disgorge, so I like it to be on the fresh side. And as long as it's on lees, it's gonna remain pretty fresh. I mean, it definitely develops that aged leesy character that we're going for, but it's still protected because it has all those yeast solids in there acting as antioxidants. So I like it to be disgorged and consumed hopefully within a year or two.
Great. Well, we're going to do one last question from the attendees, and this one I'm going to direct towards all of you because I think it's a great way to end the question and answer. How does climate change affect your sparkling production? So let's start with Sue.
I'm not sure I know how to quite answer that question. Our grapes are coming in earlier and earlier every year, given the type of climate differences that we are having. We're lucky enough that this year, even with all the dry weather, our grapes were not highly affected because of that. We have a good underlying water table. And so the grapes did very well. So even with that, we could pick when we would want our grapes to come off at the perfect acidity and how they tasted. So at this point, for sparklings, they're not affecting us in particular heavily because of the type of grapes we're growing. So it is definitely affecting the overall harvest. So our grapes in general this year came in with much higher bricks than typical across the board. Sometimes you get certain crops that come in higher and certain crops that come in lower. But this year it was across the board. All that nice, wonderful sunshine and dry weather really helped in that factor for the still wines. But again, I think if you're paying attention, for the most part, you can still get your grapes when you want them.
Yeah. Anyone else want to weigh in on the climate change?
Yeah. Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, just a quick comment on that. I think working on different sites, east side of the lake, west side of the lake, north and south, we've pushed our sparkling production vineyards, have sourced closer to the lakes where it might be a little cooler than further from the lake. And so, yeah, I mean, to echo Sue, you know, we're harvesting earlier, we're harvesting at riper bricks. I mean, I look at Hermann's records from the 80s and 70s, and my gosh, I mean, the fact that they made wine in some of those vintages is pretty remarkable. We're in a different time, certainly, but I think site selection for us is absolutely critical. So.
Great, thank you, Fred. Christopher, I think you wanted to weigh in.
I was just going to give a non-traditional answer. So as we move to being a desert isle, we need more sparkling wine. So the demand is there. So I see nothing but a good excuse to make more and more and more.
I like that. Talk about it. That's a good one. What about you, Ben? What do you think?
Yeah. Hey, cheers to that, Christopher. That's all the bubbly for the desert isle in the making. Certainly hope that doesn't come to pass, because I really enjoyed the wine that you sent. It's really nice. So, yeah, I mean, whether it's for our method that we do, or for the grapes that we pick for this bubbly Candeo, we've had to be a little more diligent and especially in years like this, get out in the vineyard and start actually bringing samples to the lab, looking at ripeness earlier than we have in the past. But it's an adjustment that you make, and I certainly don't want to say that what happened here in this past vintage in terms of just the incredible heat and drought that we had here is typical of vintages going forward, because as soon as you try to decide what is typical, Mother Nature will teach you, will humble you otherwise. But we've prepared for being more attentive in the vineyards and trying to adjust our picking time and our growing practices to accommodate a warming climate. But I'll be certainly incredibly disappointed if ever comes a day when we can't do really nice acid-driven wines here in the Finger Lakes. That'll truly be a sad day. So hopefully we don't ever have to see that here in the Finger Lakes. So,
Phil, going to give you the last word on this question. So, any thoughts on climate change?
Yeah, it's. Our vintages are always so highly variable here. We went from a hot, dry year, this 2020 vintage. In 2018, we had like record-setting flooding and record-setting rainfall throughout the growing season. It's the problem with climate change is we're not just getting hotter and drier in certain regions, because hotter and drier might benefit the Finger Lakes. It might make sparkling wine a little hairier. But overall, I'm a dry red wine producer for the most part. Like hot, dry years, oh God, yeah, give me those. But the problem with climate change is more extreme weather events. So it's not just that we're hotter and drier, it's that we're hot and dry until we get 14 inches of rain in 12 hours. So it's, climate change is, I used to say, oh, well, we'll be the one region that benefits from it. But, and I'd like to still believe that, but it's very hard to predict. And our weather here, we're very vintage driven. It's hard to find comparisons for each vintage. I find there's no such thing as a typical Finger Lakes vintage. I'll let you know if I ever see one.
And to speak to Phil's comments about more extremes, it's also about the winters. So we have warm temperatures in January that are 60 degrees, and 2 weeks later we're down to -5 or -9, and they're devastating to our grapes. So those kind of events are probably the bigger game changers in the Finger Lakes than anything.
Are any of you at a point where you're changing or adding any of the grape varieties that you grow because of that change in the climate?
Merlot is very sensitive to what Sue just mentioned, those extreme temperature swings. We had some pretty nasty winters back to back in 13, 14, and 14, 15. And it destroyed our Merlot vineyards. It was like we may as well have ripped them out and replanted them for how much we had to nurse them back to health. So yeah, the more cold hardy varieties are definitely the safer bet. We haven't planted any more Merlot since then.
Tough lesson. Yeah, it's everyone around the world is impacted by that. Well, that was the last of the questions from the audience. I want to thank all of you, Sue, Phil, Ben, Fred, Christopher. Thank you so much. Thank you, New York Wine and Grape Foundation, for asking me to do this. It's been so much fun. Thank all of you for watching. I hope everyone's been inspired to explore the really fantastic array of sparkling wines produced in New York State. If you haven't already done so, visit www.newyorkwines.com. You can order the wines that we've tasted tonight and even explore other wines that they're producing at these wineries. From the indigenous hybrid grapes to international varieties, from traditional method to more modern, there really is a New York sparkling wine for every mood, every moment, every budget. And let's face it, this holiday season is unlike any other, and maybe now more than ever, we need joy that sparkling wine can bring into our lives. These wines are a wonderful way to show also our support for these hard-working New York State winemakers. So please support New York winemakers. It's so important. So to that end, I invite all of you to raise a glass and a toast. Happy holidays. Let's pray that the New Year brings health, peace, and joy. Cheers. Thank you for watching.
Cheers.